going to talk through some questions that we got from listeners, and all of these are related to building a media company, things that you need to know when you are working towards this type of initiative. And so I'm just going to dive into these questions and answer them as I work through them. The first question we got here is, what is the typical first step toward building a media company strategy? So if you're at the very early stages, where do you even begin? I would say, first things first, you definitely need to have buy-in from your leadership team. And the reason for that is, if this leadership team is not on board with these efforts, it's going to be a really tough sell long term. And I think the name of the game when you're building a media company is consistency, is long-term commitment, showing up on a regular basis, and really training your audience members to trust that you're going to show up. And this isn't just a spur of the moment thing that you've decided to test out on a whim. This is something that you're in for the long haul. So without that leadership buy-in, you're kind of dead in the water. So that's a big one. That's a big first step. From there, I would say give the audience you do have a voice, right? Ask them what they want to learn from you. What do they want to hear from you? What are they interested in hearing you talk about? And then also study what's resonated with them so far. So have there been podcast episodes that you've done in the past that were really popular? Or was there a particular email that you sent that got a lot of traction? A blog post that earns a lot of organic traffic to your website? Look at those metrics that you already have and kind of use that as a jumping off point. From there, you can expand on that content into one owned channel. So I would say start small. Don't try to be on every platform doing a podcast show and a YouTube show and a blog and a newsletter and all of these things. I would say start with one channel, like a simple monthly email. That's a good place to start. And focus on delivering consistent value through that channel. Consistency is key. Again, you're teaching your audience members to trust that you're going to show up on a regular basis, that the content you're delivering them as part of your media arm is valuable to them. It's interesting, it's entertaining, it's full of knowledge and things that they can act on and that provides value. And a couple other things, once you've kind of got that channel picked out and you've got the leadership buy-in, from there, I would say be sure to define some realistic goals so you have benchmarks to measure these efforts against. Is it doing what you're hoping it's going to do? Is it performing in a way that's meaningful? And if not, how can you adjust and make changes so that it maybe becomes that way? And then have a little bit of an editorial calendar in place. This is a big one as far as ensuring that you're consistently publishing. So make sure to plan out your topics and your tentative publish dates for those pieces of content and kind of create a roadmap for where you're headed down the road. Because the last thing you want to be doing as you're building out this media company strategy is fly by the seat of your pants, right? There needs to be some planning. There needs to be some thoughtful consideration as far as what you're talking about and the topics and the cadence and all of that. So have some sort of documented plan and start building from there. So I feel like that was several tips in one, but that's my general guidance for if you're curious about how do you get started, if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's a good place to start. The next question we got was, what do you think is the best way to build an audience? I do not think that there's a one-size-fits-all answer to this question, but what I will say is it's generally a good idea to publish editorial content that's publicly available as you're getting started with this in order to demonstrate the value that you're going to be providing through this media arm. So be sure to create content that educates and inspires and entertains. When that value is then established in the minds of your audience without the subscription of any sort or any sort of opt-in, it piques their interest when you do talk about, exclusive or gated offerings that are maybe subscriber only access. So you first have to have that foundation built up. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit of a tough sell, and you don't really have anything to stand on as far as when you're making that claim for, hey, this is valuable to you. Show them instead of just saying, hey, this is valuable to you. Show them that it's valuable. Be consistent, show up on a regular basis and provide that value, and that work will kind of speak for itself. I would say from there, go on to start creating and promoting those exclusive content and experiences. as you're building this audience, you then want to move on from that initial stage into the publicly available content, the performance content. Marketing teams from there need to create an editorial stream of content that's exclusive to subscribers. So this is where you're getting into, okay, you kind of followed the breadcrumb path. You liked what you saw, join us, right? Become a more committed part of this relationship. So this could be having them opt into your newsletter, subscribe to a podcast or a YouTube channel, whatever maybe you have events and experiences that are only for specific members of your audience. That could be another good draw, especially as people are looking for that human-to-human connection and want to be back in person again. And then also think about how your traditional webinars, your newsletters, your field and corporate events, all those things are now value adds to the membership of your brand. So again, you're incentivizing, you're giving people a reason to commit to subscribing. And then you can also tap into the fear of missing out, right? Promoting your subscription value proposition publicly in order to drive that impact. That's a powerful emotional lever that you can pull. And I think that that's something we see happen all the time is people crave that sense of belonging, right? They want to feel part of something. They want to be part of the community. They want to belong. And so this exclusive content and experiences, that's a good way to get people on board with that. And then speaking of community and kind of these symbols that communicate, I'm part of this community, I'm part of this club, merchandise can be a great way to get people on board with that as well. And it's good marketing, right? So it might sound silly, but merchandise is often a manifestation of this idea that your brand is a club, it's a membership, it's a symbol, right? It's a tribe. So by having merchandise with your logo or comment saying or whatever it is on there, it's a way for your audience members to signal to other people, this is a part of a community that I know. So for example, Club CPG, I was just looking at this yesterday. They have this really beautiful merchandise collection where they have sweaters that are branded with the logo, they have totes, they have hats, and they're all very well done. But when you see somebody post a picture on Instagram or Twitter, or as they're hosting a podcast with video, you see that sweater and you're like, hey, that's Club CPG. Like, I've heard of them on Twitter, and it piques their interest. And then it leads to this, again, oh, well, I want to be part of that community. I want to belong. So it leads to the sense of belonging, and it's a powerful emotion that really deepens that connection between brand and audience. And you might think, okay, it's just merchandise, right? These are just t-shirts and sweaters and bags. And like, how's that a connection to a sense of belonging? But it really is. And there's so many examples of this over time. I'm seeing it more and more. But you can also use it to kind of incentivize people, right? You can use it to say, like, if you invite X amount of people to subscribe, we'll send you this piece of merchandise when you do. I know that that's something Morning Brew has done before, and it's played really well. So lots of ways you can use that to, again, reinforce that idea of community and that sense of belonging. So that's kind of a three-part answer, but hopefully that's helpful. The next question I got here was, I have a limited marketing budget and it's not getting any bigger. What is a good first investment? Is it a media content marketer hire? Is it to start a podcast or a show? Where do I begin? So again, I don't think that this is something you can kind of blanket statement say, here is the answer to this question, because every use case is a little bit different. But I think it's wise to have a point person, either in-house or contractual, who can ensure consistency and kind of own that media channel and be the face of those efforts. So again, it depends on your objectives, but pick one lane and start there. That lane might be a YouTube show or a podcast. But whatever it is, there's a point person who is overseeing and ensuring consistency, ensuring a regular cadence of posting, kind of maintaining quality control. So it doesn't have to be an in-house hire. It could be freelance person. It could be contractual. But I think there needs to be somebody who is owning those efforts, because what happens when you try to have multiple cooks in the kitchen or many people running one effort is that it can get kind of noisy and jumbled and confusing for the audience members. So having that person who's overseeing and ensuring consistency and kind of, like I said, quality control maintenance, I think that that's a really good first move, because otherwise it can feel kind of ad hoc, flying by the seat of your pants, and and you want somebody who could really come in and own those efforts. So that would be my advice on that particular question. Another person asked, what is the best strategy for repurposing LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram content? Are they different? So first things first, yes, they're absolutely different. The audience that is on LinkedIn versus Twitter versus Instagram versus TikTok, they're all wildly different. And this is something that people like Gary Vaynerchuk have been saying for years. You can't just repackage once and then post the same thing across all channels, because that is lazy and it's not native to the channel that you are communicating with. So it's important to, of course, experiment and figure out what works for you and your brand, because again, there's no one size fits all answer here. But study what's popular across these different platforms. How do people use them? How does your audience use them? How do they speak across these different platforms? Are there kind of turns of phrase that are common to the channel or platform? Are there formats that are kind of native to that particular landscape? Make note of how your users and audience members use these platforms and then mirror that back. So again, this isn't just something you can, we have a blog post that would make a great piece that we push out through social media. Let's just write up some quick social copy and push it out the door. Absolutely not. You need to have something that's customized for each individual channel. And in doing that, you're going to get just more traction because it feels more native to the platform. It feels more authentic, and it's going to perform better. And it's also, yes, it requires a little bit more effort, but it does come across as very lazy and phoned in when you're just repackaging and kind of blasting it out as a megaphone. It's not very effective. So take a very thoughtful approach to repurposing and, again, experiment, but be sure that you've done your homework. That's my advice. The next question I got here is, what is the best editorially focused way to organize content, even if it's something just like a written blog? So I've been in the blogging world for about 10 years now. I've seen companies take this lots of different ways and handle it in kind of a multitude of different ways. But I will say that my favorite way is when it's very user-friendly. So it's got the reader in mind. So this is doing things like being sure to use tags on your posts so that visitors can sort and use your search feature and find things topically. Make it easy for them to get to exactly what they're looking for. Consider having streams or like a regular column devoted to thematically grouped topics. So think of a newspaper, right? They have different columns that focus on different subject matter and themes. And again, it's easy to kind of sort through the newspaper then that way and find what you're looking for. If you're looking for sports content, you don't want to have to flip through pages and pages to find it. You want it all to be on one page. So think about that as well. And then be sure, if you have anything that's super timely, relevant, news or trends oriented, and it's happening right now, put that front and center and make that very timely, right? You want to capitalize on the timeliness of that content, but then be sure to then categorize it once that moment has passed and moved on so that, again, people can find it and sort through it. So I think that there's a temptation sometimes for blogs to just kind of be this dumping ground of material. It's not very organized. It's not super categorically grouped together. So it's very overwhelming for especially a new visitor who's not really sure what they're looking for yet. You want to make it easy for people to get to what they want. And again, I think a simple search feature on the blog is a great way to do that. But you have this visual real estate on your blog site. So make sure that that's being utilized and you're grouping things accordingly. That just makes it much more easy to wade through as a reader and as a viewer. Another question we got here was, what should the mix of a company's content offering be when it comes to entertainment versus education? So I would always say to lean hard on the information and educational angle, because people go online these days because they want their questions asked or answered. They want their questions answered. So if somebody is looking for an answer to a question about something like, how do I build a media company? You should have content that speaks directly to that and educates on the answer to that question. Yes, there's value in entertainment content, but you want to be immediately useful because, again, so much of these exchanges online between brand and consumer are about a value exchange. So think about operating like a media company. For media, information is the product. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, is that, yes, there's a temptation to be, that funny, off the wall, entertaining persona online, and there is a time and place for that for sure. But when it comes to content and initially building out a media company, I think you really want to lean hard on, we are the go-to source of information for this one particular thing, for this one particular audience. So you're building authority, you're building ethos, trust, social proof with your audience. Maybe the entertainment comes a bit more down the road, or it's something that you sprinkle in, but I just don't feel like it should super be the focus right off the bat, because it's harder to communicate value when you're looking at education, information, knowledge versus pure entertainment. So unless you're like a Netflix and that's your business, that's something entirely different. But I think for most SaaS companies, software as a service, education is kind of the go-to. So something to keep in mind. The final question I got here was a tricky one, and I wasn't exactly sure how to answer it. I'm still really not sure how to answer it. But the question was, do you recommend empowering employees to build their own brands and releasing media on their own? This is ultimately reflective of the company brand, isn't it? How do you recommend organizing this? So this is a tricky thing, because having people utilize their personal accounts and kind of be a name and face for the brand is wonderful. But there is a line that has to be drawn, right? Versus what's company owned versus what's personally owned. So my suggestion here would be, if you have somebody who's really enthusiastic about being a face for the brand, releasing media on their own, kind of being an entity that's public facing, have them bring those efforts in-house and figure out how you can package those into an offering that is company branded, but also allows them to explore their interests and use their public facing persona and all of those things. I think it just needs to be documented, like what the guidelines are, right? Where are the lines and boundaries as far as what's content that's going to be used by the company, what's kind of off base as far as things that are outside that purview, I guess. So I think it's good to just in general have a policy that kind of outlines how personal social media is viewed versus owned media and those types of efforts in the company. I would say always encourage your employees to pursue their interests outside of what they're doing at work for you. But if there is an individual who's excited about doing those things, absolutely empower them to do that and just kind of map out what that looks like, and make sure that it's written down, because you want to have that point of documentation that you can refer back to if things do become a little sticky or confusing down the road, because it can be, and things are always changing with social media. It's just kind of good to have that point of reference. So hopefully this is helpful. Thank you so much for watching this season, and be sure to check out Audience Plus for everything you need to know about building a media company, and we will be back with more of these episodes very soon.